For this week's edition of my private collection, I thought we'd take a look at a gun that is immensely popular, especially with the younger crowd that comes here to replay Airsoft Arena, and that is the Mark 17, or as it's more commonly known, the SCAR H. Now, I know there's a lot of confusion out there as to exactly what is a SCAR. Video games probably have been no help in that matter. And I know a lot of kids that come in here look at every single gun on the wall and call it a SCAR, probably because they play Fortnite a little bit too much. So to clear up any kind of confusion, this is it, kids. This is what a SCAR looks like. The Special Ops Combat Assault Rifle, or SCAR as it's more commonly known, originated in the early 2000s when the United States military started looking for a replacement for the M4 and the M16 assault rifle. During those trials, quite a few companies had offered several variations that they were looking to get the contract with the military, and one of those was FN, or Fabrique Nationale, which offered their original version was the Mark 16, or the SCAR L, which was a smaller version. During those trials, it was decided that a more potent round than the 5.56 might be helpful, especially to special ops operators. So FN decided to use the 7.62 by 51, and thus the SCAR H was born. Around 2010, during the Obama administration, they decided that the SCAR L was not quite panning out to what they thought it was going to be, and there's a number of debates over why the military opted to stick with the M4, although the SCAR H was decided they were going to keep these, especially for use in special ops teams. Now, technically speaking, this is not an assault rifle. This is a main battle rifle. The main distinction between the assault rifle and the battle rifle is the round that they fire. So guns using the smaller intermediate rounds like the 5.56 are generally considered assault rifles, and guns that use the 7.62 or 30 caliber rounds are generally thought of as battle rifles. One of the main features of the SCAR is that it has a modular design, so soldiers are able to modify certain aspects of the gun without needs for bringing it back to, say, an armorer to do those modifications. Things like the barrel length could be changed while they were still in the field. Because the SCAR does not use the same buffer tube system as the AR-15, it's possible to have a folding stock design since most of the recoil components are located up in the upper receiver. The stock has several other features built in, such as an adjustable length of pull just simply by extending the stock, and it also has an adjustable comb height, so if you want to get your cheek weld to the proper height to see through the scope, you can adjust it by raising or lowering the comb of the stock. Because the SCAR H is a much larger cartridge, and the fact that the SCAR H uses a little bit of a shorter barrel, this is only like a 14-inch barrel, a fairly substantial muzzle brake has to be used on this to suppress some of the muzzle flash that comes out of a gun this size. If you've ever shot a .308 out of a short barrel gun like this, you know exactly what I mean. It puts out a fireball that's pretty substantial. The Echo 1 version that I have here comes with a suppressor that screws directly onto the flash hider, so it has that nice integrated look. If you're planning on using a tracer unit with a gun like this, you'll probably have to remove the larger muzzle brake, but it does have the 14mm barrel underneath this, so it's fairly easy to adapt if you want to use other muzzle devices. The gun has flip-up front and rear sights. There's a little button here to release it. The rear sight is adjustable for both windage as well as elevation. You just simply rotate this collar around the bottom of the sight, and that allows you to raise the rear aperture. It also has dual aperture, so you flip the little lever and you can go from daylight to nighttime sights. And they also fold down out of the way, which for using a heavier cartridge like a .308, you're probably going to end up using optics more than you're going to use open sights on it. But you know, for the sake of realism, it's nice to have those backup sights on there because you wouldn't want to be caught out in the field with a gun that didn't have any means of aiming at your target. This particular one, I put an aim point style scope on there, but in all honesty, if this was a real gun shooting a 7.62, I would probably opt for some kind of smaller telescopic, like maybe a 1:4 would probably be way more useful on a gun like this because of the 308's range. The controls on the SCAR are pretty much just like your AR-15, where your fire select is pretty much in the same place, although it is an ambidextrous design. Your mag catch is in the same general location, although once again, it does have the ambidextrous feature, and your bolt catch is located in the same exact location. So if you're an AR user and you're migrating to the SCAR, you'll very easily be able to find all the controls in familiar places. This is another one of those guns that I picked up at one of our swap meets. Fortunately, this is one of those guns that I did not have to do any kind of modification to. The original owner actually took really good care of it. And it was one of those guns that I just hadn't collected quite yet, so I was very eager to get a SCAR H into the inventory. As far as usability, it's a fairly big gun. And I think if, you know, in the real world where you're out, you know, fighting for your life and fighting for king and country, I think it's important to have a very potent, reliable weapon. But we're talking about playing airsoft here, and having something this massive and heavy generally is, you know, not really adding anything. You can play very easily with something much smaller and lighter and be just as effective. But as a collector's item, and just for sheer badass looks, there's nothing quite like the SCAR H. This particular model is made by Echo One, and it uses the 308 style magazine, so your M4 mags are not going to work in this. One thing that's important to note as far as 308 magazines go is that they're not as intercompatible as M4 and M16 mags are. I've seen a number of different magazines for, say, EBRs and M14s that don't necessarily work in the SCAR. So it's important, if you're going to buy magazines from one of these, that you probably should bring your gun along when you're shopping for them to make sure that they do fit and function in your gun. It's a fairly easy gun to work on, although it's not quite as easy to get into as, say, a M4, where you just simply slide the receiver apart. These, you actually have to disassemble the stock, and then you can slide the two halves of the receiver apart. I personally like the Echo One version over the VFC in that these are much easier to work on. If you need to take the hop-up unit out of a VFC, you have to disassemble half of the front of the receiver in order to pop that out, where these just slide out. It does use a proprietary hop-up unit in these, so that's something to be aware of. And there are some other proprietary parts on these, on the internals of these guns. So if something does go wrong with your gun, it's probably a good idea that you bring it to somebody that's used to working on one of these, so you don't end up buying the wrong parts. It's kind of interesting being here in the airsoft arena, where a lot of people that come in here, this is the first time they've held something that they've been using in a video game for years. So I think on that matter, SCARs are great to collect because just about everybody has played with one, whether you're playing Call of Duty or, you know, whatever game that's out there. It always gets a lot of attention. As far as actual usability for airsoft, I guess that's sort of up to you, because to me, airsoft is sort of half fashion show, where you're just trying to make a statement about what you're wearing and what you're carrying, and you know, you just want to look a certain way. And then there's other guys that are just coming to play and be as good at shooting and scoring, you know, and winning airsoft as a game. So it really depends on what your motivations are. But these are always great to have in any collection. If you're interested in checking one of these out or buying it for your own collection, we can get you them very easily. We generally don't stock them because they tend to be a little bit pricey, and most of the people coming in are generally looking for intermediate level guns. And I also like to sell guns that I feel fairly strongly about the quality and the, you know, upgradability of it. SCARs tend to be fairly proprietary, so if you're thinking about, you know, doing custom work to a SCAR, they're very close-ended versus like an M4. You can change the length of them, you can change a million aspects of the gun. But I think if you're buying a SCAR, you're buying it because you want this specific look and this feel. So if you want to see what one feels like for yourself before you go out and take the plunge and buy one, feel free to stop in. You're welcome to check it out. If you want to take it out on the field and take a few shots with it, you're welcome to do that as well. And until the next time, don't let the bastards get you down.